So anyway, everyone, welcome to this Substack Live. I'm Peter Rothpletz. I am the author of the Zateo's First Draft daily morning newsletter and the head writer of The Don Lemon Show. And with me today is Michael Fanone, great buddy, American hero, and overall a badass. How you doing, man?
I'm hanging in there.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're happy to have you. And I see folks are pouring in. Please post any questions you have in the chat, guys. So, Michael, one of the things I wanted to talk about with you today is some really interesting reporting from our friends at Puck. In the lead up to Thanksgiving, and then again this week, I saw two pieces, one from a good friend of mine, Abby Livingston, and another from Leanne Caldwell. And it's all about how, believe it or not, there are genuine fears that Speaker Mike Johnson might lose his gavel even before the midterms. And I say that because Republicans are expecting such a blue tsunami come next November. They, at least a significant number of them, I've seen figures as high as 20 to 30 sitting members of the House, might retire early so they can get in line for a K Street lobbying gig or just to spend more time with family. That's just crazy. What do you think of Hakeem Jeffries or some other Democrat possibly becoming Speaker even before the midterms?
Yeah, first I'll believe it when I see it. Not that I don't think that there's probably a lot of members of Congress, probably on both sides of the aisle, that are contemplating retirement just because of how toxic things are on Capitol Hill in this moment. But Republicans especially. I mean, there's been a lot of reporting about, fear amongst Republicans, drawing the ire of Donald Trump. And what that could mean. We saw Marjorie Taylor Greene come out on 60 Minutes and talk about the threats that were made to her for just going against the grain with regards to the Epstein files and drawing Donald Trump's ire, with regards to that. And, like a lot of these members are torn between their constituents who want what MAGA had promised, and what's actually being delivered, which is something wholly different. But again, if you side with your constituents, you're siding against this administration, and that with that comes some penalties. So
yeah, I think there are a number of members of the House right now who are walking this tightrope or having to do this calculus that they've never done before in the Trump era, insofar as you can even call what has been the last decade plus the Trump era, where he is now so unpopular that they kind of feel like for their own political survival, they need to distance themselves from him. But doing so will get them and their families inundated with death threats. So you have these members of Congress from the GOP who, for the first time in a long time, are experiencing what folks like you, folks like their Democratic colleagues have experienced for, as I said, 10 plus years. Do you have sympathy for them?
No, none whatsoever. No sympathy, no empathy, no compassion. Listen, I've said a lot about, or many times, that America is going to need to experience a kumbaya moment at some point. I will not be spearheading that campaign. I'll leave that up to my children and their children and so to speak. But first we need accountability. And so, when you take people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, for instance, who went on 60 Minutes this weekend and she talked about the death threats that were leveled at her and how, in the subject line, there were direct quotes from Donald Trump. Well, there's been death threats leveled at me, and the subject line were direct quotes from Marjorie Taylor Greene. And so, this is a person who is an insurrectionist. She's a traitor to this country. And so are all that are complicit in, spreading the election lies of 2020. That in and of itself has contributed significantly to the escalation that we've seen in political violence in this country. And so, to people like her, I say good riddance. Don't let the door hit you in the ass. But, and I I recognize that there are ulterior motivations, like you talked about, these K Street lobbying jobs that many of these members are going to seek out. No doubt, that's going to be a big part of it. I think, as the Republican Party grapples with MAGA and the future of their party, which I think they're starting to recognize now that MAGA may not be a permanent part of the Republican Party going forward, they're going to start to look for positions where they can be influential and also make a hell of a whole lot of money. Marjorie Taylor Greene, let's not jump to giving her all this credit when, she's waiting until one day after she's eligible for a pension. She went from having a net worth of $700,000 when she went into this public service path. And now she's leaving at a net worth that's been estimated at approximately $75 million. And so, Marjorie Taylor Greene has done well for herself. She could certainly pay for some security related to, if you want to call it standing up to Donald Trump. I think she's just a woman scorned. She had aspirations to be a senator in Georgia. The Trump administration said they wouldn't support that. She wanted leadership positions within the administration. She didn't get those. And so, I think this is all part of a calculated effort on her behalf to save face and to go out looking like like she's staying loyal to the MAGA base.
Yeah, I'm not quite of two minds on this, but I had a few thoughts in my head where Marjorie Taylor Greene, a few moments before we hopped on, Michael, was on CNN, and she was talking about how in the last, I think, few weeks, she's received somewhere in the ballpark of 773 death threats, and how she sent a bunch of those to Donald Trump, and in her words, he had no sympathy.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear, like, I don't want to live in a country where death threats are a regular thing. I feel for her. I feel for her family. But at the same time, I don't believe the real reason she's quitting politics right now is because she's actually scared for her life. No. I think it's because she is crazy like a fox and knows that her future, or rather, the next best move for her is not to be in the House of Representatives. It's to start a podcast. It is to become a media figure. She recognizes that she has ridden Trump's coattails. She's ridden this fascist authoritarian political project for long enough, and now she can cash in or cash out.
I completely agree with you. I don't think any of this is done because of the better angels of her nature. I think that this is calculated, and I think it's calculated more than likely in the majority of Republicans, specifically Republicans that are considering retirement in this moment. I don't think they're doing it to take some big stand against the administration or to somehow, fight back, so to speak. I think they're either cowards or they're, like you said, they're being calculated out this moment, or a combination of the two.
Well, let's broach the next logical question then, because if these cowards are all going to jump ship, what then is the future? Is there a future to MAGA? I think, and I must confess that I was someone, if you rewind the clock only 6-8 weeks ago, I was really, really concerned when Steve Bannon sat down with The Economist and said that everyone just needs to swallow the fact that Donald Trump is going to be president again come 2028. I didn't think there was a very high likelihood of that. I saw the writing on the wall when it came to the economy and AI. I thought that, his presidency would ultimately run off the rails. But I was a little nervous. And now I almost feel silly for being so concerned. And it's just astonishing to me to see how quickly things have fallen apart, have just utterly self-immolated, how quickly MAGA's self-immolated in just like 2 months. So do you think that they have time to recover? Do they have the ability? Do they have the willingness to recover some political power? Or are Democrats just poised to absolutely demolish them come next November?
Oh, I mean, So I look at it from a completely different perspective. And I think honestly, people, Democrats specifically, need to stop looking at MAGA through the norms of, or through the, from the lens of normal politics. Donald Trump will do whatever Donald Trump needs to do to stay out of prison, to continue to enrich himself, and if that means that he has to bypass the legal standards of our elections, I believe he would most certainly do that. I have no reason not to believe that. He tried to overthrow a free and fair election back in 2020. He elicited the support of 147 members of Congress, insurrectionist members of Congress, who should not be serving, because they lent the credibility of their office to that insurrection. I think that I think Donald Trump will do everything that he needs to do to remain in power, if remaining in power is in his best interest. And I think, again, avoiding accountability for January 6th, avoiding accountability for his unconstitutional actions during Trump 2.0 is enough motivation to try to steal another election cycle, whether it's the midterms or remain in power for a third term come 2028.
I was listening to someone on MSNBC the other day. I can't remember who. And they said, in effect, that it's been interesting to watch sort of the MAGA new media environment completely explode in the aftermath of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. You have Milo Yiannopoulos saying effectively everyone and their brother is secretly gay. You have Tim Pool going on deranged screeds against Candace Owens, saying that you can, calling her every word in the book. And so, their thesis, in effect, was Charlie was the glue that sort of held the MAGA media coalition together. Similarly, once Trump kicks the bucket, because there are the only certainties in life are death and taxes. Do we see a similar unraveling within MAGA? What happens when he kicks the bucket? Even if he tries, say, to go for an unconstitutional third term, at some point that will happen. There will be a funeral, and who comes out on top?
I think you're already seeing the infighting begin now. I mean, you have all these different movements that make up MAGA. You have the millionaires and billionaires, the tech bros who see, financial interest in the deregulation, tax breaks that the, MAGA movement offers them. You see the white Christian national movement, and, having been invited into the political conversation by this administration. I mean, none of these entities go away. I think that you're just going to continue. And I don't even see it as Trump's demise. I think that what's causing all this infighting really has a lot to do with the Epstein files.
Huh.
And the fact that, so much of the, conspiratorial nature of this political movement was based on accountability from that, and that, all of these other kind of conspiratorial rabbit holes spawned from the Epstein files, and this idea that there's this, child predator ring being run within the United States, and all the other things that have gone along with that. And now seeing that, it's very likely that, at best, Donald Trump was covering up for this behavior and these actions. And at worst, he was most likely, financially or financially benefiting from what was happening, and his ties with Jeffrey Epstein.
I think I so agree with you on Epstein, and it's such an interesting story. One, because you see, Donald Trump becoming the victim of this vast conspiracy that he really supercharged and unleashed on the American people, and it's just rich to now see him have to deal with it. I want to crib a theory, some language from Maggie Haberman, a reporter over at the New York Times, where she talks about one of the reasons why she thinks the Epstein saga is so damaging to Trump is that it kind of just pulls off the veil and it shows you exactly who he is. And what I mean by that is that her analogy is that New York high society works in a really curious, odd way, where there are sort of two concentric circles to high society. There are folks who have power, that's the broader circle. And then there's a smaller inner circle of folks who are elite, who have like the shiny patina of elite status. And Trump has always been interesting because he's been very careful about branding himself as somebody who kind of pirouettes on the cusp of those two circles. He wants to be close to the elite, but he's definitively not the elite. He's definitely within the power band. And I think what the Epstein saga has shown is no. He's elite as they come. He only cares about his rich billionaire buddies. He's doing everything he can to fleece the country. And I think a lot of folks, including our dear MTG, have finally realized that at long last. Agree or disagree?
I totally agree. I mean, I think for Trump, I I think this whole administration is really just about the grift.
Yeah.
For him, I don't think he has no interest whatsoever in governing. And in fact, I think he created this clown car of cabinet officials for the sole purpose of, creating so much chaos that, his crypto billion, gathering apparatus is widely ignored by the media altogether. And so, yeah, I think that he has, no desire to be involved. He just wants to play golf, make billions, live his, egregiously lavish lifestyle and be left the fuck alone.
That his clown car cabinet is what gives me the most pause, because their incompetence and their criminality is just so galling, so brazen, so obvious that they have a real vested interest in making sure he or some other Republican is installed as president in 2028. That's what makes me scary, or that's what makes me scared, rather. Because if they lose, there are going to be a hell of a lot of subpoenas, a hell of a lot of investigations, and hopefully, ideally, a few people, more than a few people, thrown behind bars for everything they've done just this first year of the second term.
Yeah, I just don't ever count out the establishment Democrats' lack of spine and in it, like, this is a party that failed to hold Donald Trump and the real enablers of the Stop the Steal movement, January 6th, et cetera, accountable. Biden installed Merrick Garland, who to me is history as the biggest coward that the Department of Justice has ever seen. And then they lost, for whatever the reasons, there's no one person to blame, at least in my humble opinion. But at the end of the day, you have to accept the fact that the Democratic Party failed to win a presidential election against a candidate that incited an insurrection. And did so in such a public manner, in such a brazen manner. And then not only did he not distance himself from that moment, he embraced it and called the individuals that participated great patriots to this country and pardoned them. And so, the Democratic Party has got to grow a pair. And they've got to recognize that accountability has to be act number one. And if they do retake the House and the Senate in 2026 or before that, that accountability should be first and foremost. Nothing else should take precedence over holding those individuals accountable. And the other concern that I have when it comes to accountability is the fact that we clearly have a corrupt Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the land, and ultimately, whatever the lower courts do, whatever a course-corrected Department of Justice or any other entity in our criminal justice system does to right the ship, so to speak, until we impeach some of these corrupt members or remove some of these corrupt members of the Supreme Court, we're never going to see justice, so to speak, or accountability be done in this country.
Your point about Democrats is so well taken. We lost what could have been a very easy race against one of the worst politicians in American history because of Joe Biden's raging narcissism, megalomania, because of Kamala Harris's poor political instincts to not distance herself from the administration, from Biden-Harris refusing to stop or really do much of anything at all about the genocide in Gaza, and the entire Democratic Party just sitting on their hands and allowing it all to happen, if not being outright complicit in it. I would argue they were outright complicit in it.
I would agree with you.
Sorry, say again?
I said I would agree with you.
Yeah. Michael, I want to pivot just a bit because you guys over at Home of the Brave are doing some really, really cool stuff. In particular, you have, just last week, you launched a new $250,000 ad campaign centered on a U.S. citizen and veteran arrested by ICE. Can you tell me about this gentleman?
Yeah, so Mr. Estes, he's a veteran. He was someone who was, and he's a U.S. citizen, just as important, was illegally detained by ICE for a number of days, incarcerated, not allowed any type of communication or legal representation while he was incarcerated, and then ultimately was released. But the story itself is what is so outrageous in that he was on his way to work. There was an ICE raid taking place, and he had pulled over his car because there were barricades put up. He had eventually, went and tried to explain to the ICE agents that he was simply trying to get to work. They stopped him. They detained him. He told them that he had identification. It was in his vehicle, showing that he was an American citizen. They didn't allow him to simply retrieve that. They detained him, placed him in custody, put him in a van, and took him to a holding facility. He was later transported to the detention center in Los Angeles, where he was held for a number of days, again, without the ability to communicate with anyone.
Multiple days.
Correct. Multiple
Jesus
days.
Christ.
And then when he was released, as has become the story in so many of these encounters now, estimates are well above 200 U.S. citizens having been unlawfully, illegally detained by ICE and CBP, is that he was released with no paperwork, no justification, nothing showing that this even occurred. And so, again, one of the many things that we were trying to do at Home of the Brave is to shine a light on the unlawful behavior being committed by these ICE and CBP agents and the lack of transparency that exists within this agency. I mean, this really is state-sponsored violence. This is a rogue federal agency that is unaccountable to the American people. It's even unaccountable to members of Congress who have tried to conduct oversight missions to their facilities, speak with, representatives of the agency, and have been denied access, even arrested for doing so. And so, I think that this is a big part of why so many Americans are waking up to this administration and its cruel and inhumane policies and unconstitutional policies. It should terrify every American because, again, they're not just targeting migrants. They're not just targeting these vulnerable communities. They're actually coming after American citizens who are getting caught in the crossfire.
Yeah. And of course, we're not saying that because they're American citizens, it makes what happened to them worse. This is just, it's horrible. It is unhuman, inhumane, evil across the board. But it is rather astonishing that the administration is so brazen and they're just their sociopathy that they're willing to do this to anybody, even folks who do have technical legal protections to be here in the country. Um, Michael, do you think Donald Trump is even aware that this is going on? Do you think he knows about these videos that are regularly going viral? Families being ripped apart, mothers being taken out of school bus lines as they're waiting to pick up kids. Members of Congress, I think just this past weekend, Congresswoman Grijalva was shot with gas pellets back home in Arizona. It's just astonishing to me. It's totally obliterated, vaporized his support, particularly among Hispanic voters in this country. But is he so cocooned in the West Wing that he just has no idea that, Stephen Miller and puppy killer Kristi Noem are doing this, or unleashing this type of wanton violence and chaos?
Listen, if I had to venture a guess, I would say he absolutely is aware of this. Violence has always been a part of the MAGA movement, celebrating violence specifically. And so I would imagine that the conversations that he would have with people like Stephen Miller, who is incredibly close. I mean, Stephen Miller is in the, innermost sanctums of the inner circle in Trump world, is that, he revels in this. I mean, it's by design. That this is not how immigration enforcement was carried out for decades upon decades. And you can make arguments as to, whether or not, immigration enforcement in the past was as effective as it should have been, but you certainly would not, have the same ammunition to make the argument as to how inhumane and violent it has become today. And it's done because Stephen Miller wants people to self-deport.
Yeah.
He wants them to give up their, efforts to gain asylum into the country. He wants them to flee. And he wants anyone looking to come to this country that's not white to be mortified of the treatment of Black and brown people, that in and of itself is a deterrent to stay away.
Dark shit. We live in dark times, Michael. But thank you for all your work with Home of the Brave. You guys, again, are doing some really, really cool stuff. And thank you to our audience on Substack for tuning in. We'll have more of these collabs coming up down the road. So go subscribe, follow Home of the Brave, follow Michael Fanone, and keep reading Zateo.
And thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm a big Zateo News fan. So if anybody's a subscriber or follower of mine, make sure you follow these guys as well.
Thanks, brother. Mike, you're the best.
All right,
see everybody soon.
See you.